Hello, and thanks for joining us today for ACI Learning's audit webinar. Have a question? Use the GoToWebinar question box and we will answer as many as we can at the end. Now let's get started.
Hello, and welcome to ACI's Learning Webinar Series. We're glad you've joined us. Our presenter today is Butera, and she's here to talk about the 4 tactics to attract and retain productive, energized employees with Dr. Hernan Murdoch. Anne is the president of the Whole Person Project Incorporated, an organizational development consulting firm that specializes in assisting companies to introduce, handle, and manage change. She received her Master's of Business Administration in Organizational Development from Adelphi University and holds a CRP, Certified Risk Professional, designation from BAI. Anne is the author of The 5 Tiers of Audit Competency and Say What? How to Communicate with Tact and Impact, as well as dozens of articles read worldwide. She has worked with organizations of all sizes to provide auditors and business managers with the tools and techniques needed to improve risk management practices within their organization. She has served as an audit committee member for 6 years and holds over 25 years of experience in internal audit and operational risk management as a progressive yet practical thought leader, organizational change catalyst and coach, instructional designer, and motivational speaker, as well as an author. Hernan speaks at conferences in the U.S. and abroad. He's the author of numerous articles and books on a variety of topics, including internal audit, fraud, and more. He holds professional designations as a CIA and CRMA, and he currently serves as our Vice President of Audit Content here at ACI Learning. Prior to that, he was a senior project manager leading audit and consulting projects for clients in the manufacturing, transportation, high-tech, education, insurance, and power generation industries. So what exactly is ACI Learning? ACI Learning trains leaders in audit, cybersecurity, and IT. We deliver a lifetime of learning to over 250,000 engaged students, professionals, and organizations across 6 continents. So check us out at acilearning.com and follow us on your favorite social media. We'd love to get questions from you as we go along, so please put your questions in the question panel in GoToWebinar on the right side of your screen. We'll get to them after the presentation. This webinar is being recorded and a link to the recording will be sent to you within a week. You can also download today's slides and any additional handouts by clicking the links in the handouts panel. Now let's welcome Anne and Hernan to today's webinar. Thank you for joining us, guys. Where would you like to begin?
Hi, Anne. So good to see you. How are you?
I am well, Hernan. Thanks for inviting me on this show. I'm so excited to be here.
I am very excited to see you, talk with you, and to touch on a very important topic because there are so many things going on, right? The external environment, the world we live in, has changed so much. We are talking about, of course, a pandemic. We have dynamics around supply chain, and then we have an ongoing war situation. We have energy dynamics that are playing out in many ways in a troublesome way. But I would like us to focus on talent management. And there are so many dynamics associated with it that are really not going the way we would have hoped for or expected. So we have some challenges when it comes to obtaining, maintaining, and retaining, and keeping motivated the workforce. So Anne, you're an expert in this field. So tell us a little bit about what you see and what we need to make of all of this.
Well, I guess I want to set the stage first by saying finding talent is a perennial need area for organizations. When we think about what makes our organization special, it's our human capital. Doesn't that sound so formal? It's our people. It's what our people can do. It's their capabilities. If we throw our minds back to 2020, particularly in the U.S., I know in Asia it was towards the end of 2019 when the pandemic was starting. Think about all the change that our associates have gone through. If we pause just for a minute, I think that we can see why we have the situation that we have, why it's such a challenge to find good people.
And you know what's also interesting? Let me just jump in for a second, because one of the things you said, I just wanted to underscore for everyone who's listening and watching, the fact that we have been talking for a while about automation And of course, that's such a very important
Yes.
topic. And we talk about automation as if it's going to solve all of our problems. But you mentioned something that I want to underscore, and that is that the success factor for just about every organization is really still the people.
Yeah.
All of these machines are going to do a lot of wonderful things for us, but making that a reality is going to depend on people programming, developing, deploying, and making all of this come together. So I just wanted to underscore that. Now, please go ahead. I hope I didn't distract you too much, but that's so important.
No, and let me now go one more on what you just said. And I'm going to use an example. You mentioned the automation, and the idea is, we'll have these bots, and we'll take the repetitive tasks and we'll automate them. And that'll then free up our people to do more of the creative work, more of the demanding work, more of the critical thinking work.
Right.
And the example I'd like to throw out there is 20, 30 years ago, customer service was customer service for, let's say, a bank or an insurance company or any retail customer was a relatively interesting job.
Mm-hmm.
You give them addresses to send payments. You give your customers balance information. You take requests for address changes. Pretty, I want to say maybe stressful in that you might have irate customers. Something happened. They didn't have a great service experience.
Right.
But it was kind of easy questions.
But you know
now
what?
Think about what's happened
also
with the
that,
VRU.
Another thing with customer service, and I did that work for a while, is that you also have an interesting window into the organization. So to your point about you look at payments and customers and products and services, and you also get a little bit of a window as to what's working, what's not working, and you're acquiring skills that will let you better understand the organization to move forward later on as well.
But as we automate, my point is the work that is left for the employees to do, for the auditors or the risk managers or the InfoSec people, it's more demanding.
Right.
So the skill level that we need is higher. That's really what I'm trying to get at.
Yes.
The other thing that I wanted to set the stage with is, when we all were forced to automate in our own lives, work from home. I know there were people that didn't even have laptops to use. I mean, there was shortages of equipment, but onboarding became a challenge.
Right,
Think about how many organizations onboard people by buddying them up, and they say, okay, Muffy, you're new, go shadow Gonzo, follow Gonzo around. Well, that changed.
Right, that's right.
With the height of COVIDity. So we have this volatility that is hitting people where they sit. And it's not surprising to me that people, they're kind of confused. The sentiment also, and I'm sure you've noticed this, Hernan, people view themselves as a marketable commodity. So I think that's something else that as we talk through these tactics today, I do think that we as employers, if we're on the management side, if we're on the leadership side, I think we have to be very, very mindful that our team members are viewing themselves as a product. And I think that our folks have been stressed. I think they've been stressed out by the forced work from home. I think in everybody under one roof, I think that that's taken its toll. And now that it looks like we're moving into a hybrid model, we're trying to get folks back to the office. That's another change because people have gotten used to certain routines. And so big issue to keep in mind as we go through these tactics, organizational change takes time. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to share some tactics. And I would say if you are in the leadership role in your organization, don't feel that you have to do all four. Mm-hmm. It's better to pick one and stick with it because organizational change takes between 18 months and 36 months to just take hold, meaning you put an initiative out there. So let's say you want to go agile. I'm just going to use that as an example. You have to keep saying that and proving that and demonstrating that for between 18 to 36 months for your team members to believe you and not think it's the flavor of the month. It takes 5 to 7 years to bake the change in so that it's part of your culture. So as we move through the tactics, it's not a matter of, oh, I need to do every single thing that Anne's talking about, every single thing. No, it's choose wisely, choose what will make sense for you.
No, and
Also, go ahead.
and I will also imagine that along the way, because you gave us some very interesting and very useful timelines to understand that we need to be patient and persistent. That's an important thing that I'm taking from what you're saying. But also I will imagine that there's that certain amount of disruption that this is going to cause, right? And you kind of touched on it when you were talking about people getting into some patterns. They're accustomed to working from home. Now they're going to go into the office, let's say, whether it's 1, 2, or 3 days a week or something like it, but they're going to spend their time in a split mode, sometimes at home, sometimes at work, whereas in the past, it was all at the office. So now, that disruption, can you tell us a little bit more about that? Because I'll imagine there's maybe some resistance in some cases.
Yeah. And, it's really, you are clairvoyant, Hernan, clairvoyant, because what I was about to say, and it's literally, reading my mind, what I was about to say is, while you're absolutely right, organizationally, we need to be patient and persistent. What's happening simultaneously is at an individual level, team member by team member, when faced with a change, as you put it, a disruption, I think it's a great word, because that is the way it's perceived. The first reaction at an individual level is resistance. Is the only exception to that, by the way, is if the individual is proposing the change. Whoever proposes the change is okay with it. Whoever's on the receiving end, like the caboose on the train, not so much. So at an individual level, what we've got going on is individuals' first reaction is resistance. Might even be denial. You can't mean me. This doesn't apply to me. I hear you. I hear sound coming out of your mouth, but this is not happening. Once we get past resistance, if we get past individual resistance, is really better put, because these stages, the stage of resistance, an individual can get stuck in that stage.
That's right.
And that's why sometimes we say to ourselves as managers, gee, Muffy really is like an organizational cowlick. We've tried to get the cowlick to, flatten out and go with the rest of the head of hair. It's not happening. I think we have to, ask Muffy or Gonzo to separate or to find another opportunity. So first stage is resistance. If we can point out the benefits in general, as the leadership team, individual benefits, not benefits to the organization, but benefits to the individual. Now we can move the individual into the next stage, which is chaos. As they're trying to adopt and adapt, they're trying to adopt the new behaviors, adapt their habits.
And
they're going to make
which
mistakes.
way they're going to work it out. Yeah.
They're going to make mistakes.
Right.
So as leaders, when we see that the individual is in the chaotic stage, they're trying, they might be not succeeding. We need to demonstrate that we view problems as learning opportunities. And I really mean we've got to demonstrate that.
Right.
We can't just mouth it and then almost punish the person for not doing so well. So we've got resistance. We get them through resistance. Now it's a little chaotic because they're trying to adopt and adapt. And the next stage is turning that corner, and they're in transformation.
Okay.
Which is they get the aha, they start to see the light. And now as leaders, we need to encourage. We need to verbally reinforce. That was good. What you just did was good. We need to be almost like that cheerleader, that coach.
Okay.
And the last stage is integration.
Okay.
So this can take a while as well. I will say, though, it's faster at the individual level than it is at the organizational level. You'll see individuals adapting and adopting, but your role as the leader or the manager, you really have to be committed to people development. Otherwise, this will not work.
So, and as we're talking about all of these different dynamics that play out, small organizations and large ones, whether it's departments or entire organizations and so on, and we'll talk about these different phases. So what are these tactics? Because I know you usually have great ideas, so we don't get stuck either in the problem statement mode, but we start to think about envisioning and trying to transform and start to benefit from the transformation process. So what are the tactics that you believe that are going to help us make that transition?
So, I'm sure you've heard the expression "size matters," and it's true. It is true, and it's true also about team building. I don't know what else you were thinking about, but I'm just saying size matters when it comes to team building. And what we have found, because my background, I think my background and your background are similar, Hernan. I've got a background in OD, organizational development, and that's looking at how do we get groups to perform? How do we optimize their performance? One of the things that we find is once a group size gets over 5, gets larger than 5, participation from the members starts to fall off. And if you don't believe me, think about the last time you sent out an email to 15 people. Who read it? Everyone looks at everybody else's name and thinks, oh, this went to so many people. I don't need to read it. I'm sure somebody else read it.
Get lost in the numbers.
It's kind of weird, but it happens. Mm-hmm. So when I go through some of these techniques, I know I'm thinking about some of the participants today thinking, oh my goodness, I'm in a department and we have 400 auditors. She's talking about a group size of 5. The tactics that I will share, some of them will be for the smaller organization. Others will be for the larger organization. And there are ways that we can keep breaking people down. I don't mean emotionally, but I mean grouping them.
Right.
So that we don't exceed that magic number of 5.
Okay. Yeah, and I found that with audit teams as well, in many instances where you find that once the team gets large, it becomes much more difficult to manage, but you want to maintain that connectivity among the individuals. So I hear what you're saying about the group sizes. So these tactics, which one will be the first one you want to share with us?
Well, before I get to the first one, by the way, I just want to say, for those of you who are in the smaller shop, so let's say you're in a shop where there's 12 auditors or there's 6 auditors. The issue is the opposite. People get used to working on their own. So you'll have audit teams of 1. And so we don't have team building there either. We have individuals. So it's not that, oh, wow, I've got a large audit shop, that's a problem. And neither is it, oh, wow, I've got a small audit shop, that's a problem. It's just we need to be mindful as we look at these tactics that size does matter, and some of them just need to be a little adapted. All of the tactics will work in a work from home environment, in a hybrid environment, and they'll also obviously work in a group live environment. So I'd like to start with the first tactic that will work for both large and small departments, because the focus of this tactic, which is develop a reputation for being a people developer. So this is really a change that leadership needs to make. I've over the years, I've worked with, as you probably have as well, Hernan, it's like tens of thousands of people. And I would divide managers into 2 camps. There's one camp, and I call them the design and builders. And these are people that love a challenge. I mean, you could give them a challenge. Start an internal audit department, start a risk management function, a working risk management function. And these people thrive on that. They're not thrown by ambiguity, but once they build it, they're bored. They are so catatonically bored. These are folks that thrive on achievement. The other category of folks that I've worked with, they are the natural nurturers. They are the natural people developers. So if you fall into that second category, then I would just say you're very fortunate. because you innately realize that you need to be like that orchestra leader that is getting the best and the most from each individual performer. I think we put a lot of emphasis on getting the work done. We got to get our plan done. We've got to achieve. But if we don't have our people, what do we have, and who's doing the work?
Right. Well, I think what you're describing also feeds into the psychology of the dynamics in the group as well, because if people feel that they're just a peg in this machine, then what they're going to start to feel as though they're replaceable, that we pull their humanity out of the equation, and you're just a means of production. And I think that we're past the point where that was allowed, let's call it that, right? Yeah. Where we reach a point where the workforce is now looking at the dynamics in the workplace and basically saying, no, I have a life beyond work. And even when I am working, I want it to be a place where I enjoy what I do. And that being the case, then we have to leverage that and find a way to make it work. And I think that what you're sharing with us now is that we are going to bring people in and let them understand that we appreciate what they do. We need your creativity, we need your motivation, we need your work, your product, but at the same time, if and when you leave, because that's another realization we have to come to, that people are, in many cases, moving on. There's a transient workforce. That being the case, when you leave, you're going to leave with skills. While they're here, they're going to be productive, and when they leave, they're going to leave with skills. And I think that's going to make a difference here. We need to be less selfish as well about that, because sometimes people say, well, if I'm going to grow this person and they leave, they're going to take all of it with them. Well, while they're here, you have the ability to make them productive or not make them productive. What's your choice?
Well, and your comment about when they leave, I would put out there that because of the volatility, because of the change, our jobs, all of our work is evolving. And I would say that there is an opportunity to continually learn and to continually grow. I mean, I think about, it's a little depressing. I think about how long I've been doing this work. Mm-hmm. I got started in audit focusing on retention back in 1984. Okay, so don't do the math. It's really, oh my God, it's so depressing. I'm so sorry I brought it up. But in 84, retention, the same issue was an issue. Keep in mind that when we do things that are self-serving, we've got a professionally skeptical employee base. They're among the best educated within our organizations because of the continuing education that they're required to take. Plus, by trade, they're supposed to be professionally skeptical. So when we as leaders or managers put an initiative out there, we've got to make sure that we've thought through some of the things that you just mentioned, Hernan. What about work-life balance? How do we put it out there? But when I was mentioning being a people developer, I was thinking about what you just said. I was thinking, gee, we've got to show people that if you work with me, you will continually learn things. If you work with me, I will share how I'm thinking about things. So you'll get that insight into that next level.
Right.
And if you do move on, hopefully it'll be moving up so that big picture, my people would be part of my succession plan.
Exactly.
And not that everyone wants to be the CAE, not that everyone even wants to be the number 2, but we can develop people's lateral skills into the business lines that we audit, into technology, into different auditing techniques. So I think there's really a lot to be said, but we've got tactic 1 is marketing ourselves as people developers. And we all know you can say whatever you want to say. People want to see the evidence. Right.
Now, another thing that I believe is very important here is that, when we talk about people moving on, it doesn't necessarily mean, and hopefully not, it may or may not be, but they may be moving outside the organization. But if we create a good environment, they may move within the organization. So now we increase our retention. And how about we talk about that second tactic? How about we take a look at that one?
Which, again, reading my mind. So shift now, many surveys, climate analysis surveys. How are employees feeling? Ask the question, do you have a best friend at work? And at first blush, when you see that question, you think, why are you asking me such a personal question about my, do I have a best friend at work? And it's because we have found that people like to go to work, like to stay with an organization when they feel that they belong there. And part of belonging is having someone to talk to. And you can be geographically dispersed. You can have auditors in 6 auditors, and each is in his or her own country or state, not state of mind, but I mean physical, different geographic location. But we need to make them feel that they belong to the group, that they are a meaningful part of the group. And that sense of belonging goes beyond the technical, goes beyond their job title, goes beyond their role organizationally and their work. It's getting to know people, getting to understand their values, getting to appreciate the context for them, their background. Now, I recognize that I'm sure we've all worked with that person that says, I'm only here to do a job. I'm not here to make friends. I'm not here to be liked. And I would say to you, that's more the aberration than it is the rule. People like to be part of something bigger than themselves. They like to feel that they're doing important work. So making time for people to get to know each other is important, and it runs counter to what we normally think of. When we think of running a meeting, I don't know about you, but I think most people think of use the time wisely, every minute needs to be productive and don't waste any time. Well, to create this sense of belonging, you do have to make time for people to get to know each other differently than just doing the work.
Now, and I would imagine that this is also very important for a number of different reasons. What you're highlighting is that we're social beings at the end of the day, and that feeling and need for affiliation is very, very important. So we want to make sure that we recognize that and work with it. And if we add the thing that we also added at the beginning of today's program, where we're talking about the work from home dynamics and the hybrid arrangements, where people don't have that walking in the hallway and meeting people and talking to people while they're getting coffee or water, we don't have those moments as much anymore. So we need to acknowledge that and try to work diligently to create those moments when people are going to connect. Now, I just wanted to a quick message for those who are watching and listening that please put your questions in the comment box so that we can address your question when we get to our Q&A section. And how about we take a look at the third tactic that you have prepared for us?
Before we do that, I just want to point out, in case anyone was thinking that, hey, we have a monthly meeting and the entire department is there and there's 40 people there, or our whole region is there, you're not going to get this sense of belonging happening with that large group. So the comments that I made earlier about remember the number 5. If you're in a larger department, get people in breakouts or get people working on projects. If you're going to do something, if you're going to make, let's say that you're a manager and you want to create within your piece of a larger department, you want to create that sense of belonging. Things like, never have I ever as a game, when it's just your directs together. Carve out time so that people can get to know each other more holistically, not just in their traditional work rule. I did want to get that point, Hernan, because I don't want to create this expectation. Tell us about yourself, and you're one of 40 people. That's not going to work, and that's not a good use. It's not a productive use of time. So I did want to get that in there. I do think if you're in a larger department and you don't, you say to yourself, well, how are we going to do this? I think you could have special events for people that are celebrating, let's say, anniversaries, monthly. And so you have this get together. You can, if you're part of a larger global organization, you can create these forums. Like, who wants to just get together and talk about fill in the blank? And just get that kind of seed it, start it, and then just let it take over. And people will find others with common interests. It might be that they want to have a forum on data analytics. It might start out that the chat get together is technical,
Right.
but the motivation behind it, I'm interested in doing this. You're not making me do this. I want to affiliate with somebody. And when you get with someone, it's like a hobby. You start to enjoy it. So I
Right.
did want to make those points about the size and about letting it start to happen organically if you're in a larger organization, but create that opportunity. Let people know that it's okay to have these forums on work time, because ultimately the sense of belonging will really pay dividends organizationally.
Okay. Perfect. Great ideas. Appreciate that. Yes.
So now I'm ready to shift. Now I'm ready to shift. I think that part of the team building needs to give our team members coping skills and give them the competencies that they need. So the third tactic is define the skills that are needed to get the job done. And as part of this, let people know where they can go to get those skills. Because, and this might sound really, really basic, but fundamentally what we're really talking about is, what's the training plan? What's the development plan? And when I say training, I don't mean that it's all classroom. By the way, I also don't mean that it's all self-study. But what are those experiences? And maybe the easiest way to start to identify this is to start bottom up and then go top down. When I say start bottom up, start thinking about tactically what needs to be done and what competencies are needed to accomplish that. That was what my first book was about, the 5 tiers of audit competency,
Yes.
to really start to articulate what are the behaviors. When a team member thinks, well, let me start it differently. Most individuals, for those of you who have done performance appraisals, most individuals think that they are doing a really good job, at least a good job. And if you don't believe me, then you might not have done a lot of performance appraisals. Because when you do performance appraisals and you say to the person, how do you think you did? Most people are like, well, I did this well, and I did this well. And you might be thinking, I don't think it was as well as you thought.
Mm-hmm.
And so my point here is, if your team members do not know what skills are needed and where they stand in that skill development, they will immediately think that they're ready to be promoted after about a year. In fact, it would not surprise me if they wanted your job, that they would think that they could jump into your job, after maybe 18 months. That job doesn't look so difficult. I think I could do that. On the other hand, when you now lay out and you call out the competencies, now you're setting a path for a person, and you're letting them realize, hey, now they can self-manage, now they can self-direct, so that I think it's super important to not only articulate what the competencies are, but also let people know where they are along that path.
And I like that, Anne, because you're talking about how we look at skills and competencies, which we need to understand that they're different things, by the way. You also highlighted the importance of distinguishing between training and development, which is another distinction we also need to get comfortable making. And then you also are highlighting the importance of short-term versus long-term. And one last thing that I'd like to point before we move to the next one is in terms of how we have these things written up and how we use these things. Because in many instances, what I have found is organizations put a lot of effort and dedicated resources to creating these type of frameworks and matrices and so on, but then they don't use it either consistently or at all. And it just ends up being one of those resources that they have on the side, but they never use it. So I think it's very important that we have it and that we use it and go back to it, because another magical word here will be feedback. So I think that becomes very important in making sure that this technique or tactic number 3 gets applied and yields the results that we're hoping for.
Well, and just to build on what you just said, Hernan, it needs to be communicated and it needs to be available. I mean, this cannot be something that no one knows about. Do you know what I mean? This is something that should be readily available on a SharePoint site so that people can view their careers. I liken it to if you've ever played bingo, that card where you got to, the B's, the I's, the N's, the G's, the O's. You want to make sure you get your coverage. And if people understand what good looks like for each organizational role
Right.
and how they can get to be good, the variety of ways available to them, I think you really create a huge retention strategy, retention strategy.
Excellent. Excellent. Great ideas there. So let's talk about tactic number 4.
Yeah. So this one, I have to say, when I was thinking about the centers of creating centers of expertise, which is the fourth tactic, you need to have a department that has more than 2 people in it to do this. I was thinking really more about the larger departments. And I was also thinking about the departments where people don't want to move up the ladder. They see what that job is like and they say, you know what, I do not aspire to be the CAE. I don't even aspire to be a number 2 within the department. I really like the technical side of auditing. I really like the testing. I like the data analytics. So this tactic, creating these centers of expertise, is a way of retaining those folks that do not want to move up, but they want to build their skills laterally. The concept behind it is, where do we get some of the information that's very specialized? For example, in some of our businesses, the people that are on the revenue generating side of the business, of the business, or the technical side of the business, do some really niched out things. Maybe we have very specialized markets, or maybe they're not so specialized. We just need to learn more about them. We need to understand the markets better. Each of these things, which is unique to our organization, could become a center of expertise within your department. So let's say that, I'll use a simple example. Let's say that I'm on your team and I have a purple passion for data analytics. I just love the concept of data mining. I just love data. I love thinking about how we can organize and array data and sort data and analyze data. And I would, eat, sleep, and drink it. I'm just that interested in it. And I'd like to pursue that some more. But I still like auditing somewhat. But I want to pursue that. If you enable me as part of my job to create this center of expertise, and it would be publicized within the department that if you have a DA question, a data analytics question, go see Ann. Maybe I get a spot on a SharePoint site, and I just tell the department, I'm putting articles and I'm maintaining these articles. And if you have any questions on these articles, see me. Do you see what I'm getting at, Hernan?
Right,
It's very, very
right.
flexible. But the starting point, I would say, would be, where are the areas of interest that people have? Because what you're effectively doing is this: you're getting people to volunteer to do this,
Right.
because these are the folks that are just their work value. They're one of their primary work values is being a technical expert.
Well, for a lot of people,
being
what
that
you're
go-to
looking
person.
for is how your expertise and your knowledge and your experience is recognized and valued and treated,
Exactly.
so that you don't become invisible, right? And that's one of the
Exactly.
challenges that people have. Again, I keep going back to how we started talking about work from home and hybrid arrangements, where we now have a dynamic where we are seeing each other less and less. And one of the challenges that we have, and we have to be very mindful of this, is what I consider the risk of becoming invisible, where no one knows who you are, where you are, how you feel, what you know, and that it leads to you become disassociated with the organization, and eventually, like they say, people leave, whether they leave their boss or they leave the organization or they leave them both. But we need to be very mindful of ways that we can help improve this dynamic. Now, just in the interest of time, Anne, because I know there are a couple more things we want to do before we get to the Q&A, but what are a few other tips or techniques that we can continue to embrace that will help us in this journey? What kinds of things can we do to continue to build this team dynamic?
So there's one other idea that I actually put out in the form of a question, and it's, in what ways can we continue team building on an ongoing basis?
Yes.
Because I see this situation as very fluid. I see it as volatile as the world in which we live. Many organizations are considering, if they haven't already adopted, agile. How can we become more flexible? How can we be more fluid, be more responsive? That, if we take a page out of that, we've got to stay on top of these tactics. They might work now. We need to enable them to adapt. And more importantly, I think it's helpful to get feedback from our team members, what's of interest to them. I mentioned earlier about work values. We have this assessment on career anchors that we administer, and it enables an individual to identify what are the core values that make them want to work.
Yes.
And when you can get a good overlay between the corporate values and the individual work values, then I think you've got a great recruitment strategy. Do you know what I mean? That feeds right into a great retention strategy.
Right.
But the bigger point that I'm trying to make is, this is something that we just don't focus on for 5 minutes. Okay, now we're done. Check in the box. We worked on retention and attraction. Let's move on. It's perennial. It's a moving target.
It's an ongoing dynamic. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. So when we think about some of these things, it's not just once and done. And I think that's a very important message to take with us as we carry forward, that we're going to see these things as something that we need to continue to nurture. Otherwise, what will happen is, either through neglect or for other reasons, we're going to lose either momentum or even get started. And that's something we want to avoid.
Well, when I think about a couple of clients, and folks go through different stages in their life. And I think we've all seen it. When you're single and unmarried, you don't mind traveling the globe. You get married, you start having kids, and you know what? Going halfway around the world no longer has that same panache. It doesn't have the same attraction. And unless we can factor that in, as people get older and they have aging parents, and they have kids, and they're sandwiched in between, it does take its toll. I think we've seen that coming full circle in our conversation. I think we've seen that. People were forced to work from home. People who thought they never could work from home, and now they don't want to come back. So I think we've got some challenges now that we didn't have back in 1984, but I think we can work through them. I think there are some tactics, as we've been discussing, that we can definitely get through them.
Okay, very good. Now, I know you're a big fan of philosophy, and you always like to share some words of wisdom. What was okay?
I am. Okay. So now I'm taking a page out of Aristotle, but I so believe this. We are what we repeatedly do. I know some people think we are what we eat. That's probably true too. but I really believe. That excellence, is a habit. You get into certain patterns, and I think that we need to be very sure and mindful that the habits that drive our lives are productive ones.
That is so insightful. And I also like the fact that we had a very systematic way of looking at some of these. The challenges abound, of course. But I like your tactics and how you explain the context in which they will work. We spoke about small organizations, larger organizations, short-term, long-term, and all of these other dynamics that I believe help provide context to all of the things that you shared with us. So thank you very much, Anne. I really appreciate it. Now, before we go to Q&A, just a few words about IT Pro TV and how we can look at the audit content that we're developing for everyone that's available for viewing.
Thanks, Ann and Hernan, and to our viewers, if you have any questions, be sure to enter them right now in the chat panel on the right side of your screen. Well, before we get to the Q&A, I'd like to tell you about Audit Pro TV. Audit Pro TV is a subscription-based, on-demand CPE learning platform that's effective and engaging. A 1-year subscription costs less than a 3-day classroom course, and it allows you to gain access to a library of internal and IT audit, fraud, risk, and cybersecurity learning from anywhere at any time. Visit acilearning.com to learn more about Audit Pro TV and request your free demo to learn what all the fuss is about. All right, Hernan, let's start with our first question.
Very good. Okay, Ann, are you ready?
I am.
Okay. All right. We have a question from Fancy, and the question is, what advice would you give to a new leader of a very big team over several regions?
The first piece of advice I would give would be, don't make any big binding decisions for the first 90 days. Don't. Spend your first 90 days listening, meeting all of your constituents, meeting as many of your people as possible. That would be my first piece of advice, because it's complicated. It's political, it's multi-leveled. And once you put something out there, remember what I said earlier, organizational change, the initiative takes between 18 and 36 months to take hold. So you want to come out as a new leader as confident, not arrogant. You want to be able to come out with your plan, with your vision, but you don't want to have to you don't want to give the idea that it's like flavor of the month. So I'd spend the first 90 days meeting with as many people, all different levels, constituents and team members. Second piece of advice is, I would say to the new leader, figure out how you're going to stay in touch with these people. Look at your calendar, because I know global, that's been one of the benefits of all this virtual business, and the technology has gotten better. But I mean, figure out when you can carve out time to make the rounds and minimize the jet lag. But you've got to develop, that time to get acquainted. So those would be the two top pieces of advice I would give right out of the gate.
Great advice there. Thank you very much, Ann. So we have a question from Eliza. Which of the 4 tactics is the hardest to implement within an organization, and why?
I don't know if they're necessarily hard. I think it's more, what culture are you in? So for example, this idea of belonging, you have to allocate time in a meeting to play a game, like 2 lies, 2 truths and a lie, or, never have I ever. In some cultures, it's like, oh no, we're not playing a game.
That's
we're
true.
not playing a game.
Right.
Are you kidding me? We're not playing a game. And so that would just fail, because it just is not a good cultural fit. Mm-hmm. So what I would say, when in doubt, toss it back to the team members, because they'll know what they really want to do. So if you're thinking about one of these tactics, give them some ideas, or throw it to them, toss it to them, and say, this is what we're looking to achieve. It's things are better when we work together, and we're trying to get our teams more solidified. Or maybe you put it out as, we're trying to create more consistency or crosstalk or cross-sharing across our teams, and give it to a couple of teams to come up with some ideas.
Excellent idea there and suggestions. Yes. One thing that I found very interesting over the last few years, I believe it's been getting a little bit of traction, is book club. Now, of course, which books you choose also plays a role, but it serves different purposes. And I know some of people in audit are very much focused into, okay, so what's the takeaway? And of course, we spoke about the importance of the social dimension and the psychology. But if you still really want to have a say in terms of skills, you can also have book club with a diversity of topics, where you have some deeper reading, reads, some lighter reads, but everybody gets to talk. They get to choose. You get to choose, and you create a lot of dynamic and interaction. So you just wanted to share that as well. Well,
Yeah.
and we have another question from Christina. And her question is, what advice do you have for those wanting to manage up to increase engagement?
So I'm not sure that I understand the question. I'm going to take it, and if Christina, if I'm not catching it, type quickly into the chat what you really mean. What I'm reading into your question is, hey, I'm not the leadership. I'm not part of leadership, formal leadership, but I want to influence what's happening, and I'm here, and I want to share some of these ideas upward. What's the best way to do it? That's what I'm taking out of your question. I hope I got that right, because that's what I'm going to answer. So if I'm not right, type fast, Christina. What I would do is I would pause and I would say to myself, what's important to my CAE and his or her directs right now? What's important to our organization right now? So, for example, some of our clients are rapidly growing through acquisition. So there's a lot of organizational change happening, and there will be a lot of organizational transformational change happening. If you want to suggest doing some of this team building, I would make that suggestion within the context of, my understanding is we're going through a lot of change, and I'm thinking it might be helpful to get ahead of recruitment or get ahead of retention efforts by really making us a very sticky organization. And I is this something of interest? Because if it is, I have a couple of ideas. Notice how I'm couching it within the organizational, what's important to the organization as a whole, what's important to audit. And I originally said it backwards. We should start with what's important to the organization first, and second, what's important to audit, because that really should be the way it flows. And then weave in how this team building can help that goal achievement.
Well, you will be happy to know that Christina followed your advice and notified us that you read the question correctly and answered it in a way that was very valuable as well. So very good there, yes. But making it purposeful, right? What is the need, and how is this going to help us satisfy that need? Okay, we have a question from Richard. How will you measure the success of the 4 tactics after implementation?
So, how much do you want to measure them? Because you could do pre and post surveys. You could use SurveyMonkey. I mean, you could, if you really want to, play nicely in the sandbox, go talk to your HR generalist and see what they'd be thrilled to see you, and say, gee, this is what I want to do. Do you have any surveys? But the measurements really, I don't think it's that difficult. I'm sure you're measuring headcount today. I'm sure you're tracking training today. What are people training on? I'm sure most organizations have some type of a QA function. When people are unclear about what they are supposed to do, there's a lot of rework. When people, I'm thinking about specific behaviors that you could measure. So at a macro level, you could look at the surveys pre-post. You could look at turnover. How long are people staying? Where are they going? I don't know if your HR area, another plug for HR. I don't know if your HR area religiously does exit surveys, but you could start to find out, well, why are people leaving? And understand that. And work that into your retention plan. But you also can look to see, you could just kind of tell when people are happy. I mean, you see the interaction. If I were a leader and people were coming to me with ideas, that would show me that they're engaged. That would show me they've got more ideas, and they're ideas that would make the workflow go better, that would make the methodology go better. So I think there's several ways that you could measure. But I'm loving the fact, by the way, that you want to measure. I think that is so important, by the way. I think it's hugely important to measure the results.
Great suggestions there, and definitely appreciate it. We have a follow-up question from Pansy, and this goes back to something that we mentioned earlier on. What is the best way to tackle resistance from team members?
I think understanding where it's coming from, because you can't, it's It's like when someone objects, when someone says, "Oh, that would never work." You've got to kind of understand where are they coming from with that point. What is the source of the resistance? And I would keep an open mind, because sometimes what they're saying is real. At a minimum, it's real for them. I would also say expect the resistance. Sometimes the resistance is just because they don't understand it. I mean, the way they heard it, it doesn't make sense. Maybe they misheard it, or maybe the way it was communicated, we didn't word it the right way. Managing the message is just as important as the message itself. So if people don't understand it, if we didn't conceptualize it well, we've got to work on that. We've got to work on that as well. So expect the resistance, understand its source is very important. Very proactively, though, scrutinize the message, because the tactics that I was sharing today, they're not tactics to mandate. They're not. We're going to force you to play this game. That's not the spirit in which I'm offering the tactics.
Well, Anne, thank you very much for sharing your insights and the wealth of experience and knowledge that you have on these subjects. Unfortunately, that's the last question we can respond to at this point in time. Thanking you, thanking all of those who joined us today. Wonderful questions, great interaction. Wish everyone success, and I hope you come back again and that we can do this another time so that we can continue to learn from each other. So thank you, and until next time.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining today's webinar. You will receive a link to the webinar recording delivered to your inbox. See you next time.